My wife's hospital affair was exposed when she brought home a toy from her lover. So I gathered proof, ruined their careers, and took back control. I, a 29-year-old man, have been married to my wife, a 30-year-old woman, for 7 years, and we have a daughter who is 5 years old. Depending on who you ask, some would say we got married young. I know I heard a lot of that while we planned the wedding. The thing is, we have known each other since late in high school, so I feel like we had enough time to get to know each other to the point where I could confidently propose. We were both relatively mature for our ages when we were younger. She knew she wanted to go to medical school, and I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It's part of why I felt we were meant for each other. My HVAC business was already doing really well before I turned 20, so by the time she was ready to go to medical school, I was able to support her. I suppose our younger selves would be very happy with where we are. Well, career-wise, at least. But some things have happened that make me wonder whether there were some red flags I missed, or whether people just want what they want, regardless of how much you care and how much effort you put in. I've never put a wrong foot forward when it comes to my wife. We pretty much grew up into adulthood side by side, so you can't fault me for thinking that I knew her fully. Enough of the yapping, let me try to cut to the chase. As I've said, my wife went to medical school. She did great there, and now she's a general practitioner, which is awesome. I've never been prouder of anyone because I watched her graduate from high school, then university twice. I will admit that I sometimes feared I'd feel inferior with a high-achieving wife, but I'm doing fantastic for myself. I didn't go to college, but that's because I knew it would be a waste of my time. Instead, I used those same 4 years to apply the throttle on some new enterprises, like a detailing business, and my hard work paid off. So yeah, I made a lot, and that surely helps me feel good about myself. Do I regret not going to college, even now? Nope. My wife, the doctor, obviously works at a hospital, and as expected, she has colleagues she's friends with and some she steps away from being enemies with. Typical workplace drama, whether you work in a retail store or a tech company. The thing is, it became a bit disconcerting to me when a certain name started to pop up a lot more than the other coworkers I heard about quite often. Let's call the guy Devin. If you've ever heard of the stupid concept of work husbands, that's what Devin started to sound like to me. Anytime something happened at work while she was at lunch, she always happened to be eating lunch with Devin. She was scared of walking to her car when leaving work late at night. Who was there to save the day and accompany her? Devin, of course. There was even a really annoying day when she started to gush about Devin. His 2 cats and Chihuahua, which he couldn't stop showing her photos of. At this point, I obviously became very cautious of Devon. I think any man would. After all, it seemed like Devin was interested in her with how much he seemed to be around her. I joked with her one day, with an ulterior motive, asking whether Devin knew she was married. She said he did, and after a brief pause, she reassured me that I didn't need to worry about him one bit, that he's basically her brother. This didn't really convince me, and it was made worse because I hate hearing sentences including the phrase like a brother to me. But I decided to let it go at that moment because I didn't have anything solid beyond his name coming up a lot to base strong suspicions on. Now, before I go into what happens next, I need to give you a little bit of background on the sexual side of my relationship with my wife. I've never been the kind of guy who needs to have sex 5 times a week. Once or twice in 2 weeks fills, or should I say empties, the tank for me. The best part was that this worked perfectly for my wife too. She isn't a high libido kind of woman, so we had a really harmonious sexual life in the early stages of our marriage. Unfortunately, almost out of nowhere, her interest in sex just died. We spoke about it, and she blamed hormones, stress, the weather, upcoming exams, her diet, and so on. With each thing we tried to fix, nothing changed. In the end, I never blamed my wife for this, but honestly, even though I could cope with sex just twice a month, it started to become hard on me. I seriously considered looking outside my marriage, but I never came close to acting on such considerations. Now, here's where that comes in. One day, my wife comes home and excitedly tells me that she's interested in us trying to spark up our life in the bedroom again. At this point, it had been about 2 years, and I'd wagered that we hadn't had sex more than 5 times in that period. So, of course, I was a bit stunned by her sudden enthusiasm to get things started again. Oh wow, what's making you so eager for us to start trying again? I had to ask because sex almost never seemed like something my wife thought about unless I brought it up. I had a discussion with some people at work about sex, and it really brought up a lot of things that we might be able to try out to spice things up, was what she responded to me. I was on guard when she said this because talking about sex should be less awkward or juvenile among doctors than any other group of people. but I'd never gotten the idea that she and her coworkers talked about things like that. So I asked her what they talked about and who she talked about these things with. After all, I know most of her coworkers by name. Just Devin and some of the others, she said. Like I said, I know most of her coworkers by name, so the rest of them being relegated to the others left me feeling uneasy. I felt like challenging her at that point, because I felt like it might have been a personal conversation with Devin, and if she was talking about sex with Devin one-on-one, that would not be in good taste, obviously. No problem, I'm listening, I said. So on she continued, telling me about how the conversation went from how important sex is to sexless marriages to sex toys. Then she let it slip that she used our case as an example in this conversation. I mean, I've never been bitter about the whole sexless situation, but it can be extremely frustrating. So to hear that it's being brought up by her in public conversations with coworkers, by the way, many of whom know me rather well, made me very unhappy with her. However, my wife is a rather private person, so this didn't sound right to me. So this was just you and Devin then, right? I said this quickly to catch her off guard and watch her reaction. She seemed startled and flustered, but was quick to deny it. No, it was me and some of the others. Devin was there, though. I looked closely at her. She tried to maintain my gaze, but her eyes kept darting away. There were probably 5 seconds of silence before I said, "Tell the truth." She said nothing, and this time she just looked down. I saw a teardrop fall from her eyes. It was just you and Devin, right? Looking back, this was uncharacteristically relentless of me, but I think all the Devin stories had me on something of a mean streak. Looking back, I'm glad it came at that moment because I might have let it slide otherwise and ended up musing about it for hours. She squeaked out a yes. "Okay, continue the story then," I said to her. But she didn't say anything because I had caught her in a lie. We just sat there in silence for a very long time, and I was extremely pissed, but I did my best to keep my composure and stay calm. After about 2 minutes of nothing but quiet, she finally apologized. "I'm sorry for lying. I knew it wouldn't be a good look that I had a private conversation of that kind with him alone." She looked at me, but I kept a stone face. "But I swear we just talked. There was nothing else to it. I don't think you did anything unless you're banging in the broom closet at work. But I hate how you're bringing our private life to other people. I especially hate you bringing our private life to Devin of all people." Really? So it was talking to Devin that could potentially break the sexual deadlock we've been sitting through in our marriage? You know what this looks like, right? I swear he's like a brother to me. I've always said it, and I hate that you don't believe me. There's nothing between us, and talking to him about it was just like talking to a friend or even like talking to a therapist or something. At this point, I realized I was shaking with rage because I could tell that my wife was slowly trying to turn this thing around against me. Suddenly, she was about to be the victim. I've had this happen during arguments with her, but before then, it had never been with something that pissed me off so much. So I told her, "Before you turn yourself into the victim here, it's fine. Keep having your sexual conversations with Devin, the brother, who you have such deep interactions with. I'm actually interested in seeing how this unofficial sex therapist can help us out in the bedroom." And with that, I stood up and left the room. I slept on the couch that day. Now, I'm going to need to fast forward about a week. The next 2 days were a bit awkward, but we eventually got past it, and I didn't hear anything about Devin, which for me worked out beautifully. I knew she'd still be interacting with him since they worked together, but at least I didn't. I'd need to keep hearing about him. And that was enough for me, at least in that moment. I thought things were fine, and we were about to have things go back to normal. Until a week had passed from the day we had our big argument. Yesterday, my wife came back home at night holding a plastic bag that I could tell had a long box in it. She seemed very apprehensive, but I could tell she was doing her best not to act too differently. This went on for probably about 30 minutes while she tried to make normal conversation, and I started to get impatient. But eventually she sat down next to me in the way she does when a serious conversation is about to be had. "So, babe, remember what we talked about trying to get our bedroom life active again?" I nodded. I decided to take a leap and get something that I thought might help us a lot in the bedroom. Or help me, because I know I'm the issue. Then she pulled the box out of the plastic bag. It did not come in discreet packaging, so it was very clear it was a dildo, a big one. It was purple, and the graphics on the box made it obvious that the thing could vibrate. I'm not opposed to toys, to be honest. I think they can help out a lot more than they can harm the bedroom experience, at least when used tastefully. But my wife has always been vanilla, so this move was a bit of a shock to me. Then again, she claimed she had such an enlightening conversation about intercourse with Devin. Obviously, my mind went back to that very annoying night, but I did my best to keep my emotions in check. My wife pulled the ridiculous purple plastic penis out of the box and held it as if it were made of glass. I kind of just looked at it because I had never needed to use toys. In my previous relationships, my anatomy did the job well enough. But I understand how different everyone is, so some people, like my wife, need more motivation. I tried not to make the situation too awkward since it seemed like she didn't know what to say either. So all I could mutter was, "Why do they have to make them so colorful?" She seemed relieved that I said something, and I think that relief was what made her slip up. I remember exactly how she said it, I know, right? "I don't know why Devin chose that color. Something closer to a skin tone would have been nicer." She had a smile on her face and kept looking at the stupid thing, but I could hear my blood rushing through my ears. It almost seemed like she didn't realize what she had just admitted to at that moment. I couldn't figure out whether I wanted to erupt at her or just keep what she had said close to my chest since she was unaware of the bombshell she had dropped. Being discreet wasn't possible though because I felt like my head was going to pop. "Devin bought you a dildo?" It came out a whole lot louder than I expected it to. She looked shocked and confused at first. Then I assumed she played back the last minute in her mind, realized what she had let slip, and her eyes widened in fright. I stood up, shaking my head over and over, searching through my mind for the right words to say to her. How does the person you claim is like a brother to you end up having deep sexual conversations with you and buying you toys? It was hard for me to grasp. She said something I couldn't hear, and I calmly asked her to repeat it. I was hoping there was some kind of explanation or misunderstanding, but nope. What she said was, "I was going to buy one for us anyway, so it saved us some cash." There's a reason why it came out in a whisper, and that's because she knew how idiotic it sounded. I didn't even bother saying anything to that because she was in the phase of an argument where she senselessly tried to justify her actions. I've never felt worse at any recent point in my life than I did yesterday. I felt like there was a lot of aggression and negative energy that I needed to let loose, but I simply couldn't do it in any socially acceptable way. I wanted to interrogate her about Devin, but I knew she'd deny everything, especially while I was shaking with fury. So I just grabbed my car keys and my wallet and left the house. She gently tried to stop me once, but I glared at her, and she backed off. I drove around town for hours in the night, and it helped to clear my head. I got a hotel room last night and extended my stay for tonight as well. I'm not certain whether I'll be going home tomorrow, but I decided to see if I can get some advice from all of you here. I have a strong feeling that she and Devin are effing, but I want solid proof. Let me know what you all think. I'll stick around in the comments for as long as I can. Edit. You guys don't need to convince me that she and Devin have some kind of thing going on. I'm not in denial. I just want to make sure that I have evidence in a way that is absolutely undeniable. It'll help me in more ways than one. Edit 2. Yeah, I probably should have kicked her out of the house instead of leaving myself, but I really couldn't be around her for as long as it would have taken her to pack a suitcase. So I think it was better that I took myself out. Edit 3. I saw a few suggestions that I check her phone, and I'm probably going to do that. But if I'm going to do that, it can't be right away because she'll still be on guard. However, a lot of your comments gave me ideas, so I think I'm going to see if I can get in contact with her coworkers that I'm friendliest with. It could backfire, especially if they are more loyal to her than me, but let's see. It sounds like your wife's bedside manner with Devin is a bit too cozy for comfort, and now she's bringing home souvenirs from their little talks. I hope she at least got a discount code for her infidelity kit. Nothing screams trustworthy relationship like your wife coming home with a gift from her work buddy Devin, right? I mean, who wouldn't want to spice up their love life with a colorful, vibrating accessory chosen by the third wheel in your marriage? If you're in the market for solid proof, why not hire a private investigator? Or if you share a vehicle or your wife's phone has location services enabled, you could discreetly track her movements. Hey ladies and gents, it's been a while, but I had to be really patient. I hope that you all were too. I have an update, and while that might be great news for all of you since it provides a very compelling continuation to my ordeal, it is very bittersweet for me. After about a week, I went back home. My wife apologized over and over and said she'd limit her interactions with Devin. I just nodded and nodded. I certainly wasn't over the situation, but I knew that I needed to be at home and on good terms with her to be able to learn the true extent of her relationship with Devin. It took an excessive amount of time for us to start being friendly with one another again. I made the risky decision to reach out to two of my wife's coworkers, who knew me and who I felt would be the least likely to snitch on me. One was a guy we'll call Rob, and the other was a lady we'll call Anna. I started with Rob because I hoped that, since we're both men, he'd feel a degree of loyalty toward me and tell me the hard truth. I didn't have his phone number, and I couldn't show up at the workplace, but he was easy to find online. Shout out to LinkedIn for hooking me up. I sent him a message, explained who I was and how he knew me, and then we arranged to meet up at a bar for a few drinks. When we got there, I didn't jump straight into Devin talk because Devin is a coworker of his at the end of the day. But I simply mentioned that I felt some kind of way about the Devin dude, and I'd like to know what he had observed between the two of them. Rob seemed to silently calculate how much he wanted to tell me, but he eventually let me know that my wife and Devin were extremely close. He had no evidence that they had anything beyond being extremely close work friends, but he approved of my suspicion because he sort of felt the same way, even as a spectator. I thanked Rob for his help. Next up was Anna. Women tend to be a lot more privy to workplace gossip, but that was the exact reason why my meeting up with her to discuss two of her coworkers could be extremely risky. I felt like there was very little to lose, though, so I went for it. It was the next day when I met up with her in a public space. Anna was a rather pretty woman, so it made sense why she was one of the colleagues my wife usually complained about. It was probably just that girl-on-girl competitiveness we all know. My hope was that if my wife didn't like Anna, Anna probably didn't like my wife, and she'd help me out. "Your wife and Devin," she said with a pained expression on her face. "I don't know how much you know, but there's definitely something going on between the two of them. I really hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the buzz at the hospital is that they've been getting into it at work, for lack of a gentler way for me to say it." As Anna said that, I knew I was angry, but I also felt a sense of closure because I had finally been proven right. I wasn't crazy for thinking there was something between my wife and Devin. So I thanked Anna profusely and went back home. That night, as my wife slept, I grabbed her phone and went straight for her messages. Her chat with Devin wasn't hard to find, and I scrolled and scrolled. But it was clean. In fact, it was a bit too clean for my liking. There was no talk about the toy, nothing even close to inappropriate in there. I even jumped into her email and some of the social media apps she used the most, but there wasn't anything to convince me that my wife had anything else going on with him. I started to feel crazy, like I may have blown the whole thing out of proportion. Well, that was all before I went through her gallery app. Initially, I didn't see anything of note. There were selfies, the sky, and clouds. On her drives home, food she'd eaten recently, and other boring things. At that moment, I felt like I had judged her very harshly. But just on a whim, I decided to check the trash folder on the phone. A literal sex tape. It had been deleted a few days back, but there was an actual sex tape in her trash with what was clearly my wife in scrubs being railed from behind by another guy in a similar outfit. The environment seemed like some kind of room in a hospital, which would make sense. Their work. Romance was strictly a work romance, but it went as far as intercourse on the premises. I was furious. I had to watch an entire 5-minute video of my wife having sex with another man. I had really hoped that I would find nothing and my life would go back to normal, but that was the best outcome for a fool who wants to be blissfully ignorant, and that's never been me. So I sent the video over to my phone, removed any evidence that I had touched her phone, and stayed up the rest of the night coming up with a plan of action. I had the proof I needed, and all that was left was to make perfect use of it. In the morning, my wife went off to work, and I said goodbye to her, acting as normal as I could. As soon as she left, I brought out her suitcases and began packing her things. We've lived together for a very long time, so it was impossible for me to pack every single thing. She owns in a relatively short amount of time, but I made sure to get most of her essentials. I aligned the 3 suitcases I had filled neatly by the door to our house. After that, I went to my laptop. I drafted a very long email to the hospital she worked at, citing my concern that employees at their facility were having sexual relations on the property. I talked about a lack of professionalism, ethical considerations, and sanitary concerns, as it looked like they did their business in an unoccupied patient room. I've been running my own businesses for years now, so I knew the right words to use to get the hospital very concerned about what was going on. I was even tempted to send the video to her family members, but I recognized early enough that would have been a step too far. I'd let them know what I found out, though, once my soon-to-be ex-wife was made aware herself. It took a lot of waiting, but night finally came, and my wife arrived back home. She walked into the house with a smile on her face, but it instantly dissolved as she saw her suitcases lined up by the door. I don't regret it, and it was a whole move, but I couldn't help but say, surprise. Looking back, I'm glad that I gave in to that impulse. "What's going on?" She was in an instant panic. I just looked at her. I asked her what she thought was going on, and all she could say was, "What did I do?" "You know what you did. You're going to have to leave right now. You can come another time to get the rest of your stuff, but not right now." She was dumbfounded, and I could see tears beginning to well up in her eyes. "Save me the waterworks and go. I'm sure you'll have a cozy bed to sleep on back at Devon's place, so go." There, though you might not be used to having sex with him outside work. At this point she had started crying, and I had not a drop of pity in me. In fact, it was irritating to watch. So I walked toward the doorway where she was, picked up 2 of her suitcases and took them to her car. I came back, met her standing there still bawling her eyes out, and took the last one. By the time I came back, she was standing on the outside of the doorway, and I unceremoniously closed the door behind her. It took almost 30 minutes, but I finally heard her car start up and drive away. She didn't need to know how I found out, but she couldn't play dumb when she knew I knew. Not too long after, I got a response from the hospital that the concerned individuals are no longer in our employ and were terminated based on a breach of medical ethics and professionalism. Both Devon and my soon-to-be ex-wife, taken down in one fell swoop. Very satisfying. I've also started working with a really excellent divorce lawyer who told me it was great I saved the evidence I had found, as painful as it might have been to watch. I added all her family members to a group, let them know what I had found out about their sweet, high-achieving doctor, and left the group. I'm too busy to deal with all of that drama. So, everyone, that's it. She'll be my ex-wife, hopefully very soon. And as much as it hurts to have spent so many years of my life on something that ended up being so flimsy, I'm glad it ended sooner rather than later. I appreciate you all for supporting me on my initial post and sticking around for this eventual update. Have a nice life, everyone, because I know I'll be doing my damn best to do that. Well, congratulations are in order. It sounds like your wife and Devon have been very busy playing doctor in more ways than one. Who knew the hospital was offering such unconventional employee benefits? Kudos to you for your detective work. You've gone above and beyond to uncover the truth, even if it meant enduring an impromptu viewing of your wife's extracurricular activities. It's like winning the jackpot in a game of how not to trust your spouse, but hey, at least you've got closure, right? And now you can look forward to a bright future without the hassle of trying to trust someone who's been sneaking around like a teenager at a house party. Here's to moving on and finding someone who appreciates monogamy as much as you do. What do you make of this? What would you do if your partner came home with a special gift from a friend? Thank you for joining us today. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you soon.